There is a moment that arrives in every person's life when the heart stands at a crossroads. On one side is safety, the familiar territory of distance, independence, and emotional control. On the other side is love unpredictable, exposing, and deeply human. Many people choose safety without even realizing it. Not because they don't want love, but because love asks them to feel something they have spent their whole life avoiding: discomfort. You see, the human heart is designed for connection. It is not built to live behind walls forever. But when someone has learned, often from early experiences, that closeness can lead to pain, their mind creates a strategy. Stay self sufficient, stay distant, stay protected. And that strategy works for a while. It protects the heart from rejection, from dependence, from the vulnerability of meeting someone. But it also protects the heart from the very thing it longs for the most: real love. Because love does not live in emotional distance. Love lives in presence, in openness, in the willingness to be seen. And that is exactly where the uncomfortable feeling appears. When someone begins to get close, when the connection deepens, when emotions start becoming real, a strange tension arises inside. It feels like pressure, like the urge to pull away, like something inside whispering, "This is too much." Most people interpret this feeling as a signal to escape, but it is not. It is a signal that the heart is entering new territory. Growth always feels uncomfortable at first. Think about it. Every transformation in life begins with a moment where the old way no longer fits, yet the new way still feels unfamiliar. Love is no different. When emotional closeness begins to activate that inner discomfort, it is not a threat. It is an invitation to stay, an invitation to stay, an invitation to breathe through the moment instead of running from it, an invitation to discover that vulnerability is not the enemy. It is the bridge. Real commitment is not built in moments of emotional ease. It is built in the moments when two people stand face to face with their fears and choose connection anyway. The truth is, independence is valuable, strength is valuable, self reliance is valuable. Self reliance is valuable. But none of these qualities were ever meant to replace connection. Human beings are designed for partnership, for emotional resonance, for shared experience. And when someone allows themselves to feel that uncomfortable pull, when they resist the urge to escape and instead remain present, something powerful begins to happen. The walls start to soften. The nervous system begins to learn that closeness is not danger. And the heart slowly discovers something it may have doubted for a long time: that love does not trap you. Love expands you. The discomfort that once felt threatening becomes a doorway to deeper trust. The vulnerability that once felt unbearable becomes the very thing that creates intimacy. And commitment stops feeling like a loss of freedom and begins to feel like a shared journey. This is the quiet transformation that happens when someone stops running for emotional discomfort. Because the truth is simple: the feeling you most want to avoid is often the exact feeling that will lead you to the life you desire. When you allow yourself to stay present with vulnerability, you do something incredibly courageous. You teach your heart a new story, a story where closeness is safe, where connection is not weakness, where love is not something to escape from, but something to grow into. And in that moment, something extraordinary happens. The walls that once protected the heart no longer feel necessary, because the heart has finally discovered its greatest strength: the courage to remain open. Many people who struggle with emotional closeness are not avoiding love itself. What they are actually avoiding is the feeling that comes with it, the subtle loss of control that happens when another person begins to matter deeply. For someone who has learned to rely heavily on themselves, independence feels like safety. It feels predictable, stable, and manageable. They know how to operate within their own world. They know how to regulate their own emotions without needing anyone else. But when intimacy begins to grow, something unfamiliar starts to happen inside them. Suddenly, their emotional state is no longer entirely self contained. Another person's presence, words, or absence begins to affect them, and that experience can feel unsettling. This is where the internal conflict begins. On the surface, they may genuinely enjoy the connection. They may admire the person, feel attracted to them, and even imagine a future together. But beneath that attraction, a deeper emotional alarm system can quietly activate. The mind begins interpreting closeness as a potential threat to autonomy. Questions may arise internally without being spoken aloud. What if I lose my independence? What if this person expects too much from me? What if I become emotionally dependent? These thoughts are rarely conscious decisions to reject love. Instead, they are protective responses shaped by earlier emotional learning. When someone grows up in an environment where emotional needs were dismissed, ignored, or inconsistently met, the mind adapts by building a strong sense of self reliance. It learns that depending on others might lead to disappointment, pressure, or emotional overwhelm. Over time, independence becomes more than just a personality trait. It becomes a survival strategy. The person begins to feel most comfortable when they are in control of their time, their emotions, and their personal space. Relationships can still exist, but only at a distance where their autonomy remains untouched. The difficulty appears when a relationship naturally begins moving toward deeper emotional intimacy. Healthy connection requires openness, communication, and mutual reliance. Yet, for someone who associates dependence with vulnerability, this stage can feel uncomfortable or even suffocating. The closer another person gets, the more the instinct to create space begins to appear. They may suddenly feel the urge to withdraw, focus heavily on work, hobbies, or personal routines, or emotionally detach without fully understanding why. This withdrawal is not necessarily a lack of care. In many cases, it is the nervous system attempting to restore the emotional balance it is familiar with. Distance brings relief because it reestablishes independence. It reduces the sense that someone else has influence over their inner world. For them, closeness can feel like standing too close to the edge of something unpredictable. What makes this pattern confusing for both partners is that it often occurs right when the relationship is becoming meaningful. Just when trust begins forming and emotional depth appears, the avoidant response pushes them to step back. From the outside, it can look like disinterest or emotional coldness, but internally, it is often a quiet struggle between the desire for connection and the instinct to protect their independence. Understanding this dynamic reveals an important truth. The distance is rarely about rejecting the person. It is about managing the discomfort that closeness awakens. Until that discomfort is understood and gradually tolerated, the instinct to withdraw will continue to appear whenever love begins asking the heart to open a little more. For many people who struggle with emotional closeness, vulnerability feels like standing in unfamiliar territory without armor. It's the sensation of being emotionally visible, where another person can see your fears, your needs, and the parts of you that are not perfectly controlled. To someone who has spent years protecting their independence and emotional self sufficiency, this experience can feel deeply uncomfortable. It can create a quiet internal tension that says, this is too exposed, this is too risky. Because of this, vulnerability is often misunderstood. It is interpreted as weakness, dependence, or loss of control. The mind equates openness with danger, believing that if someone sees too much, they might reject, judge, or abandon. So the natural response becomes emotional distance. Keep conversations light, avoid revealing too much. Maintain a sense of personal space where feelings stay carefully contained. Yet the paradox of human connection is that the very feeling people try to avoid is the one that makes real intimacy possible. Love cannot grow in emotional armor. It grows in openness. Two people can spend years together sharing experiences, routines, and conversations, but if the deeper emotional layers remain hidden, the connection often stays limited. It may feel comfortable, even pleasant, but something essential is missing. Real intimacy begins when people allow themselves to be seen beyond the surface, when they share their uncertainties, their hopes, their fears, and the moments where they do not have everything perfectly together. This is why vulnerability becomes the doorway to authentic love. When someone allows themselves to express genuine feelings without the guarantee of how the other person will respond, they are creating the conditions for true connection. They are saying, in a quiet and powerful way, "This is who I am beneath the surface." That moment invites the other person to step forward with the same openness. Gradually, a deeper emotional bond forms, not because everything is perfect, but because both people feel safe enough to be real. For someone who naturally avoids vulnerability, this process can feel intensely uncomfortable at first. The body may experience it as anxiety or emotional pressure. The instinct may be to retreat, change the subject, or pull away from the relationship entirely. But that discomfort is not evidence that something is wrong. It is evidence that the heart is moving beyond its familiar boundaries. Growth almost always begins with discomfort. Just as muscles strengthen through resistance, emotional capacity expands through experiences that challenge old protective patterns. When a person allows themselves to remain present in moments of vulnerability, instead of escaping them, the nervous system slowly learns something new. It learns that openness does not automatically lead to harm. It learns that being seen can lead to understanding rather than rejection. Over time, what once felt threatening begins to feel natural. Conversations become deeper. Emotional expressions feel less frightening. Trust begins to replace the old instinct to hide. The heart starts recognizing that vulnerability is not a loss of strength, but an expression of it. Because true courage is not the absence of fear, it is the willingness to remain open even when the outcome is uncertain. In that openness, something extraordinary happens. Love moves beyond attraction or companionship and becomes a genuine emotional partnership. Two people begin to meet each other not from behind protective walls, but from a place of honesty and presence. And it is within that space of shared vulnerability that real intimacy finally takes root. When a relationship begins to deepen, emotions naturally become more complex. There are moments of closeness, moments of uncertainty, moments where two people begin to matter to each other in ways that feel powerful and unfamiliar. For many individuals, these emotional shifts are simply part of building a meaningful bond. But for someone who is sensitive to emotional pressure, these moments can trigger an instinct to escape. The discomfort that arises can feel overwhelming, and the easiest response seems to be creating distance. This is where the real challenge of commitment appears. Commitment is not simply a promise made during moments of emotional ease. It is a skill developed in the moments when emotions become intense and the instinct to withdraw begins to surface. When someone has learned to protect themselves by stepping away from emotional discomfort, staying present in those moments can feel unnatural at first. The mind may search for reasons to detach, focusing on flaws in the relationship, convincing itself that independence is better, or finding distractions that create space from the emotional intensity. These reactions are not necessarily signs that the relationship is wrong. Often, they are signs that the emotional system is encountering something unfamiliar. Deep connection requires a person to tolerate feelings they may not be used to managing. These feelings might include vulnerability, responsibility toward another person, fear of being hurt, or even the realization that someone else now has the power to affect their emotional world. For someone accustomed to maintaining control through distance, this shift can feel destabilizing. Pulling away brings temporary relief because it restores the sense of independence and emotional control that feels safe. Yet every time the person escapes that discomfort, the mind reinforces the belief that closeness itself is the problem. True emotional growth begins when a person chooses a different response. Instead of immediately withdrawing when discomfort appears, they begin learning how to stay present with it. Feeling. This does not mean forcing themselves into overwhelming emotional situations or ignoring their need for space. It means recognizing that discomfort is not always a danger signal. Sometimes it is simply the nervous system adjusting to deeper connection. Staying present can look very simple on the surface. It might mean continuing a conversation that feels emotionally vulnerable instead of changing the subject. It might mean expressing uncertainty honestly rather than disappearing emotionally. It might mean allowing oneself to feel affection, care, or longing without immediately shutting those feelings down. At first, these moments can feel awkward or even frightening. The emotional system is learning a new way of responding. But with time and repetition, the discomfort becomes more manageable. The person begins realizing that feelings, even intense ones, can be experienced without losing their sense of self. This realization is powerful because it changes the meaning of commitment. Commitment no longer feels like a trap or a loss of freedom. Instead, it becomes a conscious choice to remain engaged with another person even when emotions become challenging. Healthy relationships are not built on the absence of discomfort. They are built on the ability to move through discomfort together without abandoning the connection. Two people grow closer not because everything is easy, but because they continue choosing each other through moments of uncertainty, vulnerability, and emotional intensity. Learning to stay present with discomfort transforms the entire experience of love. What once triggered escape slowly becomes a pathway to deeper trust, stronger communication, and a relationship that can withstand the natural ups and downs of real emotional life. For many people, vulnerability feels like standing without protection in a place where anything could happen. It exposes emotions that are usually kept private: the need for reassurance, the fear of being rejected, the hope that someone will truly understand you. Because these feelings are so deeply personal, the instinct to hide them can feel very strong. The mind often interprets vulnerability as weakness, as if allowing someone to see your emotional truth means giving up your strength. But emotional growth begins the moment that belief is questioned. Strength is often misunderstood as the ability to remain unaffected, independent, and completely self contained. While independence is valuable, a life built entirely around emotional self protection eventually becomes isolating. Human beings are designed for connection, and connection requires openness. When people refuse to show their inner world, relationships remain limited to surface interactions where true understanding never fully develops. This is why vulnerability becomes such a critical turning point in emotional development. When a person allows themselves to be honest about what they feel, whether that feeling is affection, uncertainty, fear, or care, they are stepping beyond the protective patterns that once kept them emotionally distant. It may feel uncomfortable at first because it challenges the identity they have built around being strong, controlled, and unaffected by others. Yet what begins to emerge through vulnerability is not weakness, but authenticity. Authenticity is the state where a person no longer feels the need to hide their emotional reality in order to maintain control. Instead of pretending that nothing affects them, they acknowledge that relationships matter. They admit that connection carries emotional weight. And rather than seeing this as a loss of independence, they begin to recognize it as a natural part of being human. This shift changes the entire experience of relationships. When someone accepts vulnerability as part of connection, they stop viewing emotional openness as a risk to avoid. Instead, they start recognizing it as the foundation of trust. Trust cannot grow where emotions are constantly guarded. It grows when people feel safe enough to reveal who they truly are without constantly managing how they appear. In this environment, intimacy becomes possible. Two people can communicate honestly, support each other through uncertainty, and build a bond that goes beyond shared activities or casual affection. They begin to know each other at a deeper emotional level, where strength and insecurities exist side by side without shame. For someone who once believed vulnerability was a weakness, this realization can feel transformative. They begin to see that openness does not diminish their strength, it expands it. It takes far more courage to express genuine emotions than it does to hide them behind distance or detachment. Being emotionally present requires self awareness, honesty, and the willingness to trust another person with parts of yourself that cannot be controlled. Over time, vulnerability stops feeling like something dangerous. Instead, it becomes a pathway to meaningful connection. The person learns that revealing their inner world does not automatically lead to rejection or loss of independence. In many cases, it leads to understanding, acceptance, and deeper love. Through this process, emotional growth unfolds naturally. The walls that once protected the heart begin to soften, not because the person has become weaker, but because they have discovered a deeper form of strength, the strength to be seen, the strength to care openly, and the strength to build relationships rooted in honesty rather than emotional distance. Thank you for taking the time to listen and reflect. May these insights guide you toward deeper understanding and meaning. Full connection. Goodbye for now, and may your journey forward be filled with courage, growth, and the kind of love that transforms the heart.